Rick has had the honor and privilege of photographing every presidential candidacy since Jimmy Carter, right? So since Jimmy Carter,
I'm that old.
it's amazing. So from a journalist standpoint, he's on today to show you what you can and can't do. Now, let me rephrase it. You can do it in Luminar or any other software, but you're going to get fired. And the one we
Other than
joked
that
about
problem.
was, yeah, the one we joked about was even like the golfing. Tiger Woods had a caddy behind him, and somebody erased the caddy to make the shot look better. Boom, they were fired. So, what are the rules in photojournalism, Rick?
Well, the rules are pretty much if you can do it in the camera, you can do it in post. So you can't add things, you can't take things away like a caddy who's in the background. If you make a portrait of someone outside and there's a telephone pole in the background, you kind of messed up. You can't take it out. So in my editorial work and my magazine work, those are the strict rules. You know, if you wished you shot it with a longer lens, you can't go in and compress it to make it look longer. It's got to be as it came out from the camera. And on rare occasions, you'll actually hear about, usually quite often some of the photojournalism contests, that they'll actually ask for the original. So it's got to be exact as it is. And in addition to doing the editorial, I do some fashion. I do a lot of travel photography. That stuff, I can go wild in Luminar, which I'm learning how to do. But as tempting as it is to add clouds to a photograph to make it better, you can't do that if it's going to a magazine. So we just did a piece for the Washington Post magazine, some of which was shot inside, some of which was shot outside. In one particular photograph, I really wanted the American flag blowing. It was a story on immigration. And I can't tell you how long I was on my knees in the mud waiting for the flag to blow behind this woman. And, you know, if it wasn't an editorial picture, well, I could just put a flag in there. But editorially, you're in the mud until you get the frame you want. And
you know, it's funny. It's funny you're saying that, Rick, because my father and mother, I found their wedding photo, 1949, cutting a wedding cake. They weren't. I mean, they're just starting out as a young Italian couple, just finished World War II. Here's my father coming in. They get married, and in the background, the wallpaper or whatever it was already cracking. There was an extension cord going from one light to another light, and it looked awful. So I went in and I added a drape to the background. I did all these incredible things, and my father looked at me and said, "You know, this is beautiful, but if your mother were alive, she would say, put it back to the other way, because that's how I remember my wedding. I don't want a fairy tale wedding." And that totally blew my mind. So from that point on, anytime I did major edits like that, I asked the client, how do you envision this image? Do you want a fairy tale image, or do you want it to look real? Do you want realism, or can I indulge in flattery? And 90%, well, you know that, the majority of the time, they want you to indulge in flattery. Yes, make my hips look smaller. By all means, remove some of my wrinkles. You know, they like that stuff. But as a photojournalist, those are things you can't do. And here's what's neat, that made you an incredible photographer, right?
what's that?
You know, the photojournalist, because you can't edit any of your works, and you had to make sure it was right.
It's yeah, and you know, you're on a very tight deadline quite often. You know, it used to be, you know, when I was shooting slide film for the magazines, well, then it was great. I shot it and I sent it. Now I'm shooting it and they're expecting me to turn it around in a couple of minutes. I mean, it's not unusual when you say, when is my deadline? And they go, well, you know, you've got 10 minutes to find the subject, 3 minutes to shoot them, and 2 more minutes to get me the picture. I mean, that's kind of pushing it a bit, but, you know, you are constantly on tight deadlines. So even if you were allowed to do those things, you wouldn't have time to do them anyway. And it's not unusual to come back from a story. And I've got a couple of frames that I can show you, to be out on a news story and, when marches were happening. I mean, it wasn't that unusual for me to go out at 5 o'clock in the evening. And one night I got home at 2:30 in the morning and probably walked about 6 miles backwards.
Wow.
And then immediately had to start filing.
Wow.
And if I worked for a wire service, I'm sorry.
Let's see these images.
Say one more time. Share my screen. Yes. Let's see what we've got. So I've kind of made, can I blow one up to start?
You got it. Yep.
Okay. So, I thought I'd start with politics. And then I've kind of mixed the whole rest of it up to show you some of the variation of my approaches. So in this picture of the president, this was a moment, and I loved it. He would grab somebody's iPhone. He got tired of waiting for them to figure out how to do a selfie. So he just do them himself. But I shot this with a drive and I got 2 frames of it. Finished this particular shoot, did nothing that I couldn't do in the camera. And as soon as this was over, I went and sat in my car. And probably 20 minutes after I shot this, my agency had the photograph.
Wow. So
the contrast of this, as opposed to something like this, which is obviously totally set up with a model, Cassandra Aileen, who I work with, and I can go in and smooth her skin if I want to. Not that she had any wrinkles to get rid of, but if she did, I could make her thinner. I can't make Joe Biden thinner. That's against the rules. So I can think of a few presidential candidates who might have liked it if we could have made them thinner. But obviously, you're not allowed to do it. Let's grab another one. It's something totally different that I do. This one, I have total freedom, and happy springtime from Boston. And it will look like this in 2 weeks. This is last year. So, I've got the gamut where I can't do anything to I can do whatever I want. And I shot this, a little over a year ago. And I love the fact that you could just, then there was nobody in the city. You could stand in the middle of the street.
I remember you calling me all excited.
That was great. Just go stand in the middle of the highway. It didn't matter. There was nobody there. I'm very upset that, you can't find parking spaces again. So let's see what comes up next. Then we kind of drop back into covering Black Lives Matter. And actually, this was the early part of the evening that I was out till 2:30 in the morning. And, here we've got a case of mixing ambient light. And I do a fair amount of flash fill. But again, on this, all I'm using Luminar to do really quite often is to take the raw file, doing the absolute minimum. Maybe I'm going to sharpen it a bit and then quick export it. And literally, as I'm hitting export, I'm dropping them into an upload folder.
Yeah. Now, here's a perfect example, because we could make this look like it was taken at nighttime. But you could make this, inside Luminar to make it look like, hey, this was past curfew. Or you could change it to make it look like it was sunrise. So that's why it's so important that the photojournalists have integrity and stick to a code of ethics.
Yeah, you can't do anything. And I have to make, when I'm covering these stories, I like it when it's getting into blue hour. The street lights are on. There's a little bit of ambient light. I may use a little bit of speed light to flash fill it. But that's really all I'm doing.
Harvey brought out a good point. Thank you, Harvey. Without changing the content in your photo, right? Are you allowed to crop?
Yes.
Wasn't the Vietnam, the famous, the little girl, the napalm girl?
Yeah, Nick Ott's picture.
Yeah, wasn't that like one of the most famous ones? He did crop to make it look like she was all by herself.
Yeah.
But in reality,
If you see the wider version of that, one of the truly iconic images, you can actually ID some of the photographers who are out of position.
Yes.
You can actually see them in the frame.
Yeah, so all those years, I thought she was by herself.
Yeah.
I thought, how did this guy ever get that? But thank you so much for bringing that out to our attention on that one.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
I mean, I can't tell you that I haven't cropped these. Some of them they
Yeah, but
have.
it's, yeah, so it's, oh, look at this one.
So this one, this was sort of that same night where I kept thinking, okay, I've got the story covered, and every time I tried to leave, you found another photograph. So this is about 2:30 in the morning, and my studio, which I live in, is right downtown Boston. So I'm literally trying to walk home, and I come by this supermarket that somebody's just smashed the windows, and I got there before the cops did. And I figured, and it was just odd to see the cops with his dog jump through the window and then come back out. And this was a matter of standing there waiting. The light in the store was actually brighter than the ambient light on the street. I find on a lot of this sort of work, I will use the speed light as flash fill more during the day than at night, because at night I want some of that, the character of some of that light. In this particular case, the officer was probably 2/3 of a stop to a stop darker than the ambient in the store. So I can add a little bit of light. I can't make the dog look like he's more or less, in the window. Or in this particular case, it was this old cooler, which I really wanted to move. Except you can't, because it's there. It's part of the image. So you can't take it out. You're not allowed to go adjust the scene before you make the picture. And you're not allowed to adjust the scene after you take the picture and enter in processing.
Gotcha.
So,
and Angela, if you have any questions, jump in anytime.
Please.
Yep, I'm monitoring the chat as I'm sitting here. Sharon asks, is the coupon code good on both membership and purchases for the next 3 days? I believe the answer is yes. You can get assets from the marketplace. I think, does it work on those, or is it just the Luminar X membership and the software?
Marketplace.
Marketplace too. Awesome. So there you go. So that's pretty much it. And then there was a question about the various downloads. Do we have a list of those links that we can share?
Rich, we'll grab that from Rich.
Okay.
And I just get one from Frank. Do you want to read Frank's comment?
Let's see here.
Frank put it in questions and answers.
Let me go there and I'll take a look. Let's see here. Do you have to get a release signed by the officer to publish his image?
No.
That's a question for you. No. Okay.
No, it is in a public place. It is a news event. So I can use this picture editorially. I can say a police officer jumping through a broken window of a supermarket. I cannot use it for advertising. I cannot use it for endorsement, anything like that. So I can't say this, this officer's dog likes this kind of dog food. Okay, at that point it becomes an ad, and then you need release.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
This
So
dog,
even
for dog food.
Sure, yeah. For magazines, most of the time there are no releases involved.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Now let's see some of your favorite shots you've edited.
Well, this one here, I mean, this one actually just won me an award, but this was a protest on Boston Common. And again, the only thing that I did to this, and sometimes my horizons aren't as straight as I would like them. So I straightened out the horizon a little bit, however, cropped out, and then just literally, gave it a little more black and tiny bit of saturation. And that's all I did to it. This is, one of the, I think this was the President Trump's last campaign event in New Hampshire. And in the case of this, again, I'm standing there, I'm waiting for my moment. I'm watching I'm literally inside a hangar and he's outside the hangar. So you're watching as the ambient light in the sky, and they've got these huge RE6K HMIs up on these big aerial lifts. They probably had half a dozen of them. And then you're just waiting until the light on the president and the light in the sky begin to balance out. And then when you get it into processing, all you're really doing is, again, playing around, adding a little, maybe opening up a shadow a little bit, you know, adding a little bit of saturation and then exporting it and hitting send.
Now, there's another question that popped up in the Q&A. Floyd asked, if you write a book, would you then need a model release?
No, not as long as it's editorial.
Okay.
So when you cross that line of editorial into advertising or endorsement, or you are editorializing in your caption. And there have been a few cases where a photographer has editorialized in a caption and it's really come back. So no. And like in a case of this, I mean, I didn't need a property release to use this photograph. If I use this in an ad, I would need to go to the folks that run this church and acquire a property release. But this is out in Central Mass, and you know, it was just that day when the reflections were right. And yes, when I went in here, this got more Luminar AI than the editorial pictures do. So this one, we played around with the saturation and the colors, and those reflections were there. You know, if they weren't there and I had the new Luminar AI, I could add them, but these were actually there. Yeah, it's really this. Anyway, it's just a beautiful spot. Jump back to a little bit of news. And this was the day that it was announced that Biden had defeated Trump. And pardon me, there were sort of these dueling demonstrations out in front of the Massachusetts State House. And here you're waiting for your moments as an editorial photographer. Make sure you want to carry the right lenses without carrying too much gear. You know, the amount of stuff I'll take on a corporate shoot or a fashion shoot is how much stuff can I cram into my Jeep? You know, if it's not in my own studio. This is, okay, how much am I going to carry today? Because, you know, folks who do a lot of walking around with their gear, I discovered this a long time ago, that camera equipment that you're carrying will gain weight during the course of the day. So it may feel light when you leave the studio in the morning is bloody heavy. This was probably an 8-hour day. And again, I walked the whole time. So this went on, you know, quite a bit at the State House. But again, I don't need a release to say Trump supporter. And I suppose I can jump to the conclusion she is a Trump supporter because she's wearing a Trump shirt, you know, standing in front of the Massachusetts State House, protesting in front of the Massachusetts State House. I can't say Trump supporter who takes Excedrin in front of the Massachusetts State House. Then I've crossed the line.
Gotcha.
Is it the same event? So, you know, on this stuff, I mean, I liked this one because I like the reflection of the State House in the windshield, and I'm hoping they're not going to drive over my toes. So I'm kind of shooting events like this. I'll usually have a 1735, and you know, if it's a daylight event, probably a 100 to 400 or a 70 to 210 f4.
So Angela, here's what's funny. Here's what's funny, Angela. A journalist like him, he doesn't see politics. He sees reflections. He sees gestures. You know what I mean? So
I've seen a lot of gestures in my career.
Yeah, there's no politics involved. It's, oh wow, look at this shot. The Capitol building in the background. This is a great setup. Please don't run over my toes. Click. Yeah. Got it. Let's go.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I mean, you're there. There are tons of people around. Not a lot of social distancing going on here at any of these events, you know. So I'm literally, it's, you know, part of the reason I'm carrying 2 cameras, 2 lenses, and a Nissan Speedlight on my 17 to 35, and an extra battery and an extra card in my pocket, because not only the weight, but you've got to be able to move. And if you're in a crowd and people start shoving, or I don't think I put any in, but you know, the police start shooting tear gas in your direction, you want to be able to move quickly. So, you know, I've got it down, you know, to certain lenses. If it's a night event, I'll probably take all my lenses are Tamron. So I shoot everything on Tamron glass. I may take a 70 to 200 2.8. Whereas if it's going to be during the day, I may take the 70 to 210 f4. Both sharp lenses, one weighs half as much as the other. Wow. So,
all right, let's see a couple more.
I just love this one woman screaming at the troopers like they're going to do whatever she's saying. I'm pretty sure they're not. But again, a little bit of flash fill.
I'm sorry, Martin asked, do you ever use right angle adapters?
Do I ever use
a right angle lens adapter?
I'm leaning towards the screen like I can hear you better that way. Right angle adapters. I'm not really sure what he means by a right angle adapter. Do you mean for the flash?
I think that's interesting. And I wonder if he's talking maybe a tilt shift lens. I don't think so.
No. Whatever it is, I don't use it. At least not that I'm aware of. So, you know, those big brackets that, you know, wedding folks use and paparazzis use, it just becomes one more big thing to work with. You know, again, we've got to be able to move fast. And, you know, so that's kind of the way we have to do it. This was spring on Boston Common. Again, in this case, I mean, I know I went in, I used a lot of the features of Luminar AI to process this.
Ooh.
Obviously, it's heavily backlit, which was the effect. And this was like the first, you know, one of those decent days on the Boston Public Gardens.
Beautiful.
So this one, I will admit, the sky didn't look that good when I shot it. This is not an editorial picture. You know, I have this saying, what do photographers do to relax or for therapy? Well, we got to take more pictures. So I do this fairly often. You know, I'm waiting for a blue hour, and I have to admit, I walked a good 2 blocks from the studio to shoot this. I just take my tripod, usually a 24-70 2.8 polarizing filter on it, and just walk until I see the picture I want. And I've walked by this, I don't know how many times, and there was something about this, and it looked pretty good. But boy,
sky, yep.
Adding that sky, you know, again, I added it. But, you know, if I tell you one of the things that I love about in situations like this, using the Luminar AI, for anybody who ever tried to replace skies before this, especially those tiny little spaces in between the trees, and you were trying to I mean, it's like night and day, you know. And the more I learn about working with this program, the more I'm amazed with it. It's just unbelievable. You can do as much or as little as you want. Again, on the news pictures, you know, put them in and export them. And then it's funny because, you know, I shoot everything raw. And then, you know, I'll be working for some newspapers and they go, yeah, we don't want it bigger than 2.5 megs. Okay, so I shot it on a Nikon 850 as a raw file, and now I got to bring it down to 2.5 megs.
But it's good that you have it. Now, let me see one more that you edited. Let's see. Oh, summertime in Boston.
This is yes. This is welcome to springtime in downtown Boston. This is the same place. Actually, this is the exact same place as the long shot with the colored trees. This is one of those trees that goes color.
Wow.
And it was just the way it was lit. Again, it's blue hour, tripod in the snow, long exposure, so I get the streaks of the light, and then bring it back and play around with it in Luminar. And it's just terrific.
Well,
you know,
awesome.
it jumps. And I mean, I've lived, again, the studio's a couple of blocks from this. And I've lived in this neighborhood for a really long time. And I'm always amazed that I go out and you see it in a different way. So,
now, like you said, what's neat is now you have options. So you saw, do you have another shot where you replace the sky?
I don't
know. Just so we can see your full catalog.
You want to see the full catalog? Okay.
Let's see.
So I've got you some long exposures. I don't know if there's anything else where I have replaced the sky.
All right, we'll move up just a little bit higher up in front. Oh, your penguins. Let's grab your penguins for.
You want to? Oh, my penguins. Yes, these are my pet penguins.
See, so again,
this is just slightly above the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. And you go there and there are just these little penguins walking everywhere. I love it. There's a sign in the parking lot that says, please look under your car for penguins, which is not a sign I'd ever seen before. But again, this is what came out of the camera with a little help from Luminar.
Yeah. See, so again, it's and thank you so much for sharing this. How about you stop sharing your screen for a moment?
Stop sharing screen. Yes, I can stop.
So this right here again sums up what we talked about before. Is, you know, are you a photographer, a graphic artist, or a retoucher? You know, photographers love Luminar because all your digital darkroom tools are right there. You can go in and have fun, and then there's a lot of people who love to be creative, and they take just as much pleasure in photographing as they do in editing. And it's neat how you can take it to the levels that that you want to go at. And Rich, thank you so much for that. Now, hey Rick, real quick story with Rick. You were supposed to come down
which story?
You're supposed to come down for like 3 days. We went on a little cruise, and then 3 days turned into 4 weeks. Yeah. He just stayed for 4 weeks, and then he goes home.
So Vinoli's saying that if you ever need a place to stay in Florida, apparently he's willing to share.
Yes.
All right. Rick, those are some great images. We appreciate your creativity.
Awesome. Thank you so much.